Join our growing community of listeners all around the globe by following Aloore Radio on all our social media platforms. On Facebook, Aloore Radio, YouTube, Aloore Radio. Visit our website on www.alooreradio.com. You can also download the Aloore Radio application on the Google Play Store by searching Aloore Radio. Call or send a message on 0903 985 3731. Let us take you on a journey across continents as we bring you latest news, captivating stories, and diverse perspectives from around the globe. From breaking news headlines to fascinating features, discover the stories that shapes our society and the voices that demand to be heard. It's Newspaper Review on Aloore Radio.
To you out there, you're welcome to Newspaper Review on Aloore Radio. We are transmitting from GSM studio at the Ministry of Information, Culture and Tourism, Secretariat Agodi, Ibadan. My name is Olukemi Omotosho. I have with me the Nation newspaper, and I'm going to be delving into the stories, all juices that are there. Please stay tuned. The first story I'm going to take from the page of the newspaper is Gbadegesin challenges Alaafin Owade's choice in court. The story can be found on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And today, Friday, January 17th, the lead story says governors back tax reform bills, seek adjustment to VAT. And I have another story that says federal government economic reforms on course despite Sanusi's doubt, with the rider that says leaders should avoid partisan undertones. That is coming from the front page of the Nation newspaper. Also from the front page, I have foreign fighters behind terror attacks in Northwest, Northeast. That is coming from the defense headquarters. U.S. honors for 6 Nigerians. The honor can be found on page 26 of the Nation newspaper. Withdrawal from council polls unsettles Ondo PDP. That story, of course, can also be found on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And on page 3, I have EFCC to arraign Otudeko Onosoya over alleged 12.3 billion naira fraud. And from page 26, I have failure to defend budget will attract zero allocation. That is coming from the National Assembly as a frown at tardiness. And on page 4, local podiri market forces will always determine fuel price. That is coming from page 4 of the Nation newspaper. Also coming I beg your pardon. Also coming from page 3, why there is food shortage in Nigeria. You can find that story about the shortage of food in Nigeria. And of course, we have torrents of tributes for Akande at 86. Saraki congratulates beneficiaries of Foundation's tertiary scholarship. The story can be found on page 3 of the Nation newspaper. And still on that page, I bear no grudge against president, says Bauchi Governor Mohammed. And on the crime page, cholera kills 9 in Rivers. That can be found on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Also on page 5, I have Tinubu Sanwo-Olu orders mourn exit of ex-Lagos HOS Ajose. And on explosion, Bodija explosion, suspects facing trial, currently in custody, says Makinde. And still on page 5 of the Nation newspaper, Ayedatiwa declares today work free. If you are interested in that story, you can turn to page 5 to know the reason why there is a work free in the state. Ex-council chairman congratulates Lagos speaker. The story can be found on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And on the crimes page, I have victims of abuse get scholarship. The victim of an abuse gets scholarship while mother seeks justice over toddler's death. The story can be found on page 5 of the Nation newspaper. And of course, I have this on page 7, the business page. It says, Nigeria, Benin Republic weighs option for sugar company revival. And OPEC, crude oil demands growth to hit 1.4 MB per day in 2025-2026. That story can also be found on page 7 of the Nation newspaper. And going forward, I have another one that says CBN unveils digital initiatives. The story can be found on the business page of the Nation newspaper. That is page 7. And coming from page 24, include indigenous voices in climate dialogue, says advocate. And another one says Tinubu's Man of the Year award excites Salias. The story can be found on page 24 of the Nation newspaper. And Farm 6 approval to finance power plants orders. That story, of course, can be found on page 24 of the Nation newspaper. Now to the news in details. I have the first one from the front page of the Nation newspaper, which says, Governor backs tax reforms, Bill 6 adjustment to VAT. With that, we'll go on a short break to be back. Please stay tuned.
Let us take you on a journey across continents as we bring you latest news, captivating stories, and diverse perspectives from around the globe. From breaking news headlines to fascinating features, discover the stories that shapes our society and the voices that demand to be heard. It's Newspaper Review on Aloore Radio.
Welcome back to Newspaper Review on Aloore Radio. We are transmitting from GSM studio at the Ministry of Information and Orientation, Secretariat, Agodi, Ibadan. You can like and share on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Aloore Radio. On YouTube it is at Aloore Radio, and our studio line remains 09039853731. Let me quickly go to the front page of the Nation newspaper with a story that says, Governors back tax reform bill, 6 adjustment to VAT. The debate on the value-added tax VAT components of the tax reforms bills shifted to the Nigerian Governors Forum (NGF) yesterday. The governors who backed the 4 bills presented to the National Assembly by President Bola Ahmed Tinubu proposed some adjustments to ensure equitable distribution of resources. The VAT sharing for formula suggested by the governors is 50% for equity, 30% for derivation, and 20% for population. The NGF proposal contradicts the federal government's 20% for equity, 60% for derivation, and 40% for population contained in the bills. At the NGF meeting held at Congress Hall, Transcorp Hilton Hotel, Abuja, chaired by Governor Abdulrazak of Kwara State. The governor said the adjustment is adopted would ensure equitable distribution of resources. President Tinubu had, during his maiden presidential chat, reflected on the raging controversy over the VAT component of the bill. If you're interested in that story, you can turn to the front page of the Nation newspaper and page 2 to get the full gist. Still on the front page of the Nation newspaper, federal government economic reforms on course despite Sanusi's doubt. The federal government yesterday said it did not need the Emir of Kano, Sanusi Lamido Sanusi's stamp of approval for its laudable policies. It insists that its economic reforms were on course, urging Sanusi to tell the truth about the government's bold economic progress despite its shift in loyalty. Minister of Information and National Orientation Muhammad Idris replied Sanusi, who at a function in Lagos on Wednesday wrote off the Tinubu administration. It says, continue from page 2. So the story continues from page 2. It says, the minister said there was no point for Sanusi to engage in divisive rhetoric because he feels estranged from his friends in government. He said, and I quote, the federal government notes the recent remarks by His Excellency, His Highness, Emir Muhammad Sanusi II regarding the economic reforms introduced under President Bola Ahmed Tinubu at a public event in Lagos. We note the Emir's acknowledgement of the noble initiative, which he said he could explain away, but his decision not to help the government. First, we acknowledge that Sanusi, and indeed any Nigerian, has the inalienable right to express an opinion, either in the form of commendation or criticism on how the government is being run. However, we find it amusing that a leader, more so one from an institution that enables forthrightness, fairness, and justice, would publicly admit to shifting of saying the truth because of personal interest and on imaginary antagonism. End of quote. If you are interested in that story, you can turn to pages 1 and 2 of the Nation newspaper for the story. Federal government economic reforms on course despite Sanusi's doubt. And still on the front page, foreign fighters behind terror attacks in northeast, says defense headquarters. The defense headquarters yesterday attributed the resurgence of terrorist attack in the northeast and northwest to the influx of foreign fighters. The activities of the foreign fighters, who serves as reinforcement for the terrorists, are aided by local informants. Director of Defense Media Operation Major General Edward Buba said. Also, Borno State Governor Babagana Zulum, who lamented the killings and violence, cautioned residents against collaborating with insurgents. President Bola Tinubu had 6 days ago ordered the probe of the January 6 terror attack in Borno State. Over 40 persons, including soldiers, were killed. If you're interested in that story, you can turn to page 1 and page 4 of the Nation newspaper for the gist. Foreign fighters behind terror attack in northeast, says defense headquarters. And I'll quickly go to page 3 of the Nation newspaper. Alleged 12.3 billion naira fraud. EFCC to arraign Otudeko, ex-First Bank MD Onosoya, Monday. The Federal High Court sitting in Ikoyi, Lagos State, has fixed January 20th for the Economic and Financial Crime Commission (EFCC) to arraign the chairman of Honeywell Group, Chief Oba Otudeko, and a former First Bank managing director, Stephen Onosanya, for allegedly defrauding the bank of 12.3 billion naira. Otudeko, a former chairman of First Bank of Nigeria FBN Holdings, and Onosanya are to be arraigned alongside a former board member of Honeywell PLC, Soji Akintayo, and a firm, Anchorage Leisure Limited, said to be connected to Otudeko. According to the EFCC, the four defendants allegedly committed the fraud in tranches of 5.2 billion naira, 6.2 billion naira, 6.150 billion, and 1.5 billion and 500 million between 2013 and 2014 in Lagos. The 13-count charge, which EFCC's lawyer Bilikisu Buhari filed in January, also alleged that the defendants made and forged documents to deceive the bank. If you are interested in the full gist of the story, you can turn to page 3 of the Nation newspaper. Alleged 12.3 billion naira fraud. EFCC to arraign Otudeko, ex-First Bank MD Onosanya, Monday. And there is this story about the food shortage. Why there is food shortage in Nigeria? Nigerian-born founder of the Canadian Black Farmers Association, Toyin Ajayi, has attributed the food shortage in the country to excessive exportation, poor attitude to local farming, and insecurity, among others. In a statement, Ajayi said the continuous demand for Nigerians' variety of foods among the nation's citizens in diaspora has led to the exportation of the largest chunk of food produced by farmers. If you are interested in that story, you can turn to page 3 of the Nation newspaper for the full details. Why there is food shortage in Nigeria. And going forward on pages 4 and 5, I have the story that says Gbade Geshin to court, void Owade's choice as Alaafin. The kingmakers selected candidate for the Alaafin stool, Prince Lukman Gbade Geshin, has accused Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde of usurping the power of the Oyomesi and violating the Alaafin Chieftaincy Declaration of 1961 with his appointment of Prince Abimbola Owade as the Alaafin of Oyo. Gbade Geshin said Makinde's alleged reliance on Ifa consultation contradicts the judgment of Oyo State High Court of December 19, 2022, which declared Ifa consultation in the selection process unlawful. He said, and I quote, as it is not provided for in the Alaafin Chieftaincy Declaration of 1961, end of quote. Consequently, he has headed for Oyo State High Court to challenge the appointment and presentation of the staff of office to Prince Owade as the new Alaafin of Oyo by the governor. If you are interested in that story, you can turn to page 5 of the Nation newspaper for the details. Gbade Geshin to court, void Owade's choice as Alaafin. And coming from that same page, Adeleke slams fresh curfew on Ifon Ilobu. Osun State Governor Ademola Adeleke yesterday imposed a dusk to dawn curfew on 2 local governments following continual communal clashes. The nation recalled that Ilobu in Irepodun local government and Ifon in Orolu Council have been as loggerheads over disputed land, which had led to the killings of over 40 people and destruction of property. The communities clashes in 2023, 2024, and this year after Governor Adeleke declared the disputed land as a buffer zone. The community started clashing on Monday, which nearly escalated before the intervention of security operatives. If you are interested in that story, you can turn to page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Adeleke slams fresh curfew on Ifon Ilobo. And coming from Ibadan, Bodija explosion. Suspects facing trial, currently in custody, says Makinde. Oyo State Governor Seyi Makinde yesterday said those responsible for the January 16, 2024 explosion that rocked Deji Oyelese Street, Bodija, Ibadan, are facing trial for terrorism. The governor, who said his administration had taken steps to prosecute the suspects, added that those involved were being held in prison, contrary to insinuation that the matter had been swept under the carpet. Residents of Bodija area of Ibadan affected by the explosion said they were still waiting for the promised compensation. If you are interested in that story, you can turn to page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Bodija explosion. Suspects facing trial, currently in custody, says Makinde. And on the crime scene, the crime page says victim of abuse gets scholarship. Gidi Real Estate Investment Limited has offered a scholarship to 3-year-old Ayobami Michael, a pupil at Christ Multi School in the Ishawo Ikorodu local government area of Lagos, following physical abuse by his teacher, Mrs. Stella Nwandigo. The incident, which went viral on social media last Wednesday, garnered spread attention and prompted a swift response from the State Ministry and Social Development. The ministry condemned the abuse, while the Commissioner, Mr. Bolaji Abubakar Ogunlende, reaffirms the government's commitment to the safety of pupils. If you are interested in that story, you can check page 5 of the Nation newspaper. Victim of abuse gets scholarship. And coming from page 7, Nigeria, Benin Republic weighs options for sugar company revival. Nigeria and Benin Republic have begun assessment process to reactivate a 50-year-old sugar company jointly owned by the two countries. Nigeria and Benin Republic had in 1975 established the Save Sugar Company as a joint venture between the two countries. The Cotonou-based sugar company has, however, suffered significant reversal and currently out of operation. Minister of State for Industry, Senator John Eno, who led a delegation from Nigeria to Cotonou for on-site inspection of the sugar company, met with Benin Republic's Minister of Commerce and Industry, Shadiya Alimatu Asoma, and had initial discussions on the future of the sugar company. If you're interested in that story, you can turn to page 7 of the Nation newspaper. And on crude oil, OPEC, crude oil demand growth to hit 1.4 MB per day in 2025 and 2026. The Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, had projected global oil demand growth rate at 1.4 million barrels per day in 2025, with a similar growth rate expected in 2026. In its January 2025 report, OPEC projected a robust global economic expansion and healthy oil demand growth from 2025 and 2026. According to the report, demand in the region of the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, is expected to grow by 0.1 per barrel, while the non-OECD region is expected to drive demand growth by accounting for 1.3 million barrel per day of total increase in both 2025 and 2026. If you're interested in that story, you can turn to page 7 of the Nation newspaper, which says OPEC crude oil demand growth to hit 1.4 million barrel per day in 2025 and 2026. With that, we've come to the end of today's newspaper review on Aloore Radio. We are transmitting from GSM studio at the Ministry of Information and Orientation, Secretariat Agodi, Ibadan. My name is Olukemi Omotosho. Thank you for listening and do have a wonderful weekend.
Let us take you on a journey across continents as we bring you latest news, captivating stories, and diverse perspectives from around the globe. From breaking news headlines to fascinating features, discover the stories that shapes our society and the voices that demand to be heard. It's Newspaper Review on Aloore Radio.
Ọ̀ṣì àwọn ṣe bẹ̀bẹ̀ abẹ́ òráyé. Ọ̀ṣì àwọn ṣe bẹ̀bẹ̀ àwa máa ń dúpẹ́. Ọ̀ṣì àṣètò dẹ̀rùn fún wa wọ́n ní ká wà lálàáfíà. Kára wa ó jí pépé. Ọ̀ṣì àwọn ṣe bẹ̀bẹ̀ àwa máa ń dúpẹ́.
ọ̀rọ̀ wa ti dayọ̀ kò sí dààmú mọ́. ọ̀nà mẹ́rin pàtàkì àjọ adójútòfò ìlera nípínlẹ̀ Ọ̀yọ́ State Health Insurance Agency ọ̀ṣíà ti ṣí kalẹ̀ fún wa. ọ̀nà kìíní tó pín sí mẹ́ta di Standard Plus ẹnìkan orí kan 13,500. ìyá bàbá ọmọ méjì 28,000 naira péré àti Standard Pig àgbàdá ńlá 108,000 naira. ọ̀nà kejì ní tagbolé community 4,000 péré forí kan. igun kẹta ní basic access to care fáwọn tí ò rọ́wọ́ họrí àtàwọn àkàndá ẹ̀dá àtàwọn kéékèèké àtàlábọ̀yún pàápàá. ọ̀fẹ́ ni ìjọba ti sanwó ẹ̀. ọ̀nà kẹrin ní tàwọn òṣìṣẹ́ fẹ̀yìntì pensioner scheme 4,000 péré forí kan. ìlò tó kù ká máa dúpẹ́ lọ́wọ́ ìjọba ìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀yọ́ tó gbé ọ̀ṣẹ́ àkàlẹ̀ àti ilé ìgbìmọ̀ aṣòfin tó fòǹtẹ̀lú gbì. pọnmi ńlẹ̀ dògbẹ́ lọ́ọ̀rẹ́ darapọ̀ mọ́ ọ̀ṣẹ́ ní kíákíá kọ́kàn rẹ̀ ó balẹ̀. àjọ ọ̀ṣẹ́ wà ní Ministry of Establishment and Training Secretariat Agodi Ìbàdàn àti káàkiri ìpínlẹ̀ Ọ̀yọ́. kànsájọ ọ̀ṣẹ́ kíákíá tẹlifóònù 090 30,000 530 0805 7,530 ẹ̀rọ ayélujára www.oisia.oy.gov.ng. ọ̀ṣíà ọ̀nà dẹ̀rùn sí ìtọ́jú tó péye.